Hi, welcome to the Couch Lit Book Club. You're joining me, Layna, to chat everything reading. Before I begin, I want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I am recording, the Yuggera and Turrbal people of the Meanjin Nation. Sovereignty has never been ceded, it always was, and always will be Aboriginal land. Hello, it's been a hot minute. Welcome to the first episode of 2025. Now, I did want to get this episode out in May, but life has chucked a few curveballs at me and it was just unrealistic and quite impossible, hence why it is out in June. I'm also solo today, so the format will be a little different and you might get sick of my voice, so I do apologize for that in advance. So let's just get straight into it. This episode includes chats on Little Women and Young Mungo, a special Mother's Day segment with a guest co-host, and an intro to our May and June book club read, Finlay Donovan is Killing It. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I've been absolutely chock-a-block busy since returning from my trip in January, and unfortunately, Little Women has been neglected because of it. So to jog your memory, we chose Little Women for our book-to-film adaptation episode, as both Lauren and I adore Greta Gerwig's 2019 adaptation. And I did actually get round to reading it, and I did give it 4 out of 5 stars. And this is actually quite a generous rating from me because I just wasn't in the right headspace to be reading any book in February, let alone Little Women. However, I can still appreciate why Little Women is so beloved in the book world and why it still stands up as a classic. So if I was going to give a realistic rating and based on my reading experience, it'd be more like a 3 out of 5 stars. But that just didn't feel like a fair rating since I was the problem and not the book. Anyway, this book just took me a long time to read. I found myself getting distracted a lot and struggling to immerse myself in the story because of so many personal things just happening all at once in my personal life. But overall, the story has stuck with me. And that's because Louisa May Alcott has published a story in the 1860s that is still so relatable in the modern day. And I honestly don't think it will ever lose its modernity because there are lessons on selflessness, resilience, consequences, forgiveness, and all of these themes regularly pop up in our lives. And I found myself really appreciating the kindness and patience Marmee offered to her 4 daughters when they found themselves being nasty to each other or even just being selfish. They had quarrels like anyone does with their siblings. They were teenagers experiencing normal teenager things. And the most amusing thing about the story is to think that teenagers in the 1860s were burning their hair off with iron curlers and getting jealous of their sisters, just like they do today. And there is just something comforting, at least to me anyway, in the fact that being an awkward teenager has always been a thing and that siblings will constantly be at odds with each other. But hopefully, like the 4 sisters in Little Women, they do have a love for each other. And that's why I think the perfect age to actually read this book is when you're a teenager or young adult and being the same age as Meg, Jo, Amy, and Beth. Now, I also know a lot of people don't get time to read, and so they look for a movie adaptation instead. And luckily for you, Little Women has been adapted to screen 3 times. Once in 1949, again in 1994, and most recently in 2019. So in preparation for this episode, I did rewatch the 2019 film directed by Greta Gerwig, and I have to say, Greta Gerwig did a fantastic job in staying true to the scenes in the novel, while also creating this whole new storyline that occurs after the novel ends. So the film is told in flashbacks to when the girls are young during the American Civil War, which is when Louisa May Alcott's novel is set, with the present day being the main storyline. This present day is set a few years after the end of the Civil War and sees the 4 sisters begin their own journeys as young women, finding love and finding their purpose. So I want to talk more about this theme of finding love because this is also a strong theme in the novel. So for most of history, there's been rhetoric of women marrying not for love but for money, and this is also very much present in the novel. Keeping in mind as well that it was hard for women to make their own money in the 1860s, Marmee's message to her daughters that marrying for money may be great and all, but marrying for love is even greater, is such a modern take. To quote Marmee, she would rather her daughters be a poor wife with a man that loves big than a rich wife with a man of very little love. She doesn't care if they marry or remain single. It is her daughter's happiness that matters. And this is the modernity that Greta Gerwig and other people speak to. I mean, even think about it in 2025 context. I mean, we still have people making comments about gold diggers. Like, just because someone is with a person who is 10, 20 years older than them doesn't mean that they are just with that person for their money. People aren't as shallow as that. And I do believe that for as long as the patriarchy is alive, this message will always be true to some extent as well. And that's because women still in 2025 may not be comfortably able to support themselves and a family. And so some feel no choice but to enter partnerships for financial stability and security, which at the end of the day is compromising their happiness. And that is what Marmee is getting at. And I want to end the Little Women segment here with a statement on its feminist qualities, because although critics agree the book is not a feminist book, they agree it does reflect early ideas of feminism, like women's independence. Now, doing a 180 from an optimistic story to one about loss of innocence and devastation, let's talk about our March and April read, Young Mungo, by award-winning author Douglas Stuart. Just a little bit about Douglas Stuart. He was born and raised in Glasgow, and like his characters, he experienced firsthand the many struggles and challenges of poverty and addiction. His book Shuggie Bain was awarded the Booker Prize in 2020 for its emotional depth and its vivid depiction of its characters, which really cemented his reputation as a major literary talent, which actually is the reason why I put Young Mungo on my radar in the first place. So I haven't actually read Shuggie Bain. It is also on my radar. However, when I was at the bookstore and I first came across Young Mungo, the story of Young Mungo actually resonated with me more, and I wanted to read it first. But it was because of this really good and high reputation that Shuggie Bain has that I actually bought the book and brought it home. So Young Mungo follows the story of Mungo Hamilton, a teenager navigating a life of poverty and parental neglect in early 1990s Glasgow. Mungo is a Protestant and falls in love with James, a Catholic in a hyper-masculine world. Being from rival housing estates, the boys should be sworn enemies, but as they begin falling in love, they dream of escaping the grey city, and Mungo must work hard to hide his true self from his elder brother Hamish, who is a violent local gang leader. When Mungo is sent on a fishing trip with two strange men by his mother, he needs to summon all his inner strength and courage to get back to a place of safety where he and James might still have a future. This book, wow, 5 out of 5 stars. If I could give it 6, I would. Like, as soon as I finished this book, I instantly wanted to reread it. In fact, I didn't even realize I'd reached the end until I was desperately looking for more pages. No joke. And I haven't actually finished a book like that before. I've never finished a book and went, I need more pages right now, and I instantly want to reread it, especially a book that is quite devastating like this one. So Mungo's life is devastating and deeply troubled, but it also has glimmers of love and hope, and I am so glad he has those glimmers, if nothing else. And I really don't want to say too much about this book because I think it has the most impact when you know very little before reading. But what I will say is my favorite character in the story actually was his sister Jodie. She is a very resilient person and is trying her best to break the poverty cycle. She has so much grit, so much courage, and it really is something to admire. She also loves Mungo very deeply. But enough about the characters, because it wasn't just the characters that captured me, it was also the writing. Because as you know from previous book reviews, I'm a big fan of dialect and slang. And, you know, I enjoyed the 1930s gang slang in Iris and the 1950s Aussie slang in They're a Weird Mob. And Douglas Stuart actually writes his novels in Glaswegian, which is a dialect I haven't been overly exposed to. And I'm so glad that I've now been exposed to it because it's a really fun dialect to read in. And this dialect really transports you onto the page, into the scene, and it just added so much extra depth and emotive meaning to the story. Like, it did take me a few pages to adjust to, but once I adjusted, like many other dialects, I was hooked. And if you haven't read it yet, please look up trigger warnings first. Like, I can't stress that enough. I can definitely say trigger warnings for alcohol abuse, gang violence, sexual assault, and neglect. So if you do have trouble going into heavy reads, please look that up first. So the next segment was actually recorded in early May to coincide with Mother's Day because it is a Mother's Day segment. So it does seem a little out of place now that we're in June. Nevertheless, I hope you enjoy the segment, and thank you to Rachel for joining me as a co-host. So, with Mother's Day earlier this month, I thought it would be nice to bring a fellow mum on the show. Hi, Rachel.
Hello, Layna.
Rachel, you're a cousin of mine and a mum to 2 adult children. Mm-hmm. So, as a way to introduce yourself, I would love to know, how do you juggle motherhood and your love for reading? And how did you do it in the past as well with 2 little kids?
Okay, so when you ask me that, my first thought is I shouldn't juggle anything with motherhood because I should be 100% being mother, doing the mother job. But reading is my mental health tool. So I always have read, and I read at night. Every night before I go to sleep, I read at least a couple of chapters of whatever I'm on. But when the kids were little, a really lovely way I read even more was reading with the kids at night. So that was our bedtime routine. We'd always read books together. When we went on road trips, one parent would drive, the other parent would read, and the kids would listen and get really involved in all the books. And then when they were in high school and we were traveling to and from school every day, we would have audiobooks. So that was a nice companionable way to be in the car together. And we still talk about some of the books that we've read or listened to.
Yeah, what are some of those books?
Well, Harry Potter is obviously a kid's classic. So we read all of those. We read 44 Scotland Street by Alexander McCall, which is probably not a normal pick for a tweeny sort of age, but they're very funny. We really enjoyed those. The Book Thief, that's another very different book. There's a series called Ingo, which is about mermaids, but it's not Disney-ish at all. It's quite dark in some places. But yeah, we've read some great books.
Yeah. Now, one of the big reasons for me actually doing this segment today is that I realized recently that I don't read from the perspective of mothers very often, if at all. Like, I'm even talking, I don't even gravitate towards books with mums in it. Like, most of the books I read and there is a mum in it, they're just mentioned. They're just a little bit of a side character here and there. And I really want to change that. You know, like the one book that I have read from the point of view of a mother is The Woman They Could Not Silence by Kate Moore, but it's a non-fiction book, which is phenomenal, but I want to read a bit more fiction, you know?
Yeah.
And another reason for like actually wanting to pick up books with a point of view from a mother is because I think it's really important to expose yourself to characters you don't necessarily relate to. Because the big reason why I don't pick up books that feature mums, especially as a main character, is because I'm not a mum myself.
Yeah.
So I don't relate to the character, so I don't find it necessarily that fun to read from. Well, at least that's my position right now. But I would like to change that, especially because it's good for personal development, you know, learning empathy and perhaps trying to understand situations and experiences that you yourself may not experience, but perhaps those around you do experience.
Yeah.
And so with that, I would love to discuss some of your favorite mother characters in books.
Okay.
Do you have any?
I do have some memorable characters in books. I guess I didn't pick these books up because they had mothers in them. I just think looking back, I guess you'd notice, oh yeah, that's a mother character, and she was quite a big part of that book, or she wasn't a part of the book for some things, but the space she left behind was notable. But characters who were in books, I told you I read Harry Potter with my kids, so Mrs. Weasley is a very important character in that series of books, and she's a mother who is very welcoming to lost orphans and anybody else who needs a place of refuge. She's there and she makes it warm and comfortable and includes them in the family. And the other character who I've just read recently is Ma in The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck, which is a really old book, and I was supposed to read it when I was 15, which is a long time ago, and I rebelled and didn't read it because it was for school. But I just read it recently, and again, Ma is this really driving force in the book who holds the family together and steps up to become a leader and really is their emotional backbone of this family.
Yeah, and as a modern woman yourself, do you think that this character of Ma holds up in the modern world?
Yeah, well, she didn't. Nothing struck me as not sitting well with me when I read the book. So it's obviously the book's a different setting, a totally different setting to now. It's set in the Great Depression in America, so the men and women's roles are completely different to what I suppose they are now. But it started off with her being responsible for things like the cooking and the washing and making sure everyone had enough to eat and who was going to cook and where they were going to get their food from. But then as the book went on, she grew into more of a leader because her husband wasn't able to do that anymore. And she was self-sacrificing, sounds like an awful thing to do, but you know, she did 1,000% for her kids. So if there wasn't enough food, she would go without something, or she wouldn't sleep because she had to do something ready for the next day for them. It was a really traumatic time the family was going through. So I don't think that mothers should be self-sacrificing all the time like that. But I guess when you have kids, you worry about them and you think, what else do I need to do for them? So that kind of rang true as well.
Yeah, and to finish out this segment, Rachel, what's your favourite book of all time?
My favourite book of all time would probably be Still Life by Sarah Winman. It's a really beautiful book that I still get really warm feelings about when I think about it, even though I can't remember all the plot points. It just really stays with me as a really beautiful book with a great ending as well.
And what's the story? What's the plot?
So the story is post-World War II, sort of group of not really vaguely connected people moved to Italy just after the war, and they're bringing up a child who is not a biological child of most of these people in the group. And it's about friendship and coming together and nurturing people who might not be your blood relatives, but you can make a family, and friendships very important. And there's some art history comes into it, and they make friends with the local people and they cook Italian food, and you can just kind of see the stone walls and an Italian city. It's just beautiful.
Yeah, you really transported us to the time, which I'm sure the book does just as well.
It's great.
And, as much as you've said that, transports you to this time, in World War II and Italy with all this great food, there is a little bit of a darker side to it where the mum is one of those characters that is sort of in the background, and it's her being missing from the book is notable.
Yes, so she's one of those characters who, because there's a mother in the book who really, motherhood did not sit well with her. It was something that she wasn't expecting, didn't really want, so she kind of fobbed it off onto this group of other people who took that role on for her. But even so, because she is the mother and she's sort of present in the daughter's life, but the other characters occasionally worry about that together and how is this affecting the daughter? So what can we do to boost her, because there's this missing mother figure in her life? Not 100% missing, but not like what you would traditionally expect a mother figure would be in a book. I guess there's a lot of books like that. There's the space they leave behind is what drives some of the other characters. Yeah, it's interesting.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Rachel. I've had a really good time having a little chat with you about books.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'll definitely have to pick up some of those books, I think.
Definitely. Thank you.
Thank you. And sticking with the Mother's Day theme and pushing myself into reading from points of views I wouldn't necessarily read from, I have gone ahead and chosen the cozy murder mystery book Finlay Donovan is Killing It by Elle Cosimano as our May and June read. I watch Books and Lala on BookTube and she raves about this series, especially the first book. She is the one who introduced me to the book and is the one who ultimately convinced me to choose it for Couch Lit. Now, without having read it yet, it has given me Dial A for Aunties and My Sister the Serial Killer vibes, where it involves some murders, but the plot isn't too serious. And after Young Mungo, I feel like we just need something lighthearted and fun. So, to get into the synopsis, Finlay Donovan is a single mum and floundering crime writer, and after a chaotic morning sending her 4-year-old daughter to school with hair duct taped to her head, she sits down with her literary agent to discuss her next crime novel. But as she is discussing the plot, the conversation is misinterpreted by a woman sitting nearby as that of a hit woman offering her services to dispose of a problem husband. And when the eavesdropping woman slips Finlay a name and a promise of a large sum of cash, Finlay finds herself plotting something much bigger than her novel. After all, they do say, write what you know. Are you sick of my voice yet? Well, luckily for you, we have reached the end of the episode. So thank you so much for joining me for my first solo episode and the first episode of 2025. Not gonna lie, it was a big job reviewing so many books by myself and fitting the episode into a very busy few weeks, but I've had so much fun doing it, and we hope to be back with another episode soon. In the meantime, keep an eye on our Instagram, couchlit.bookclub. That is where we are most active, and like always, our DMs are open for any book chats. Read up, bitches.